Quick review that this week's Torah portion, we've already sort of dealt with it enough, but just a quick recap that it has two episodes that really show a very stark contrast in Abraham's relationship with God. And when the second is compared to the first, somehow it makes it even more difficult to grasp everything that's actually been going on here. In the first episode, at the beginning of the parsha, I told you earlier on that the angels depart for Sodom, leaving Abraham alone with God. And what does Abraham do? He challenges God. He argues for Sodom, and we've already been through this, so I'm not going to go through it again. You know what the result was. And if that's not enough, even Abraham bargains with God. Now, this magnificent episode with Abraham acting as probably at his prophetic greatest, challenging even God to live up to the proper moral standards, I find it quite inspiring. And so how can it possibly be that later in the Torah portion, when God tells Abraham, take your son, your favored son, Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. What is Abraham's response? He shrugs his shoulders, says, okay. And he gets up the next morning. As I told you before, he grabs his son, he saddles his own ass, and off he goes. Not a word, not an argument. You would think this is the same Abraham who only a little earlier in the parsha had been fighting for strangers he didn't even know. And now when it came to his own son, where is the indignation? Where is the challenge to God? Like, how could you think of such a thing? Father, how could I do such a thing? What are you asking of me? Nothing, not a word. And I've got to tell you, there is a very beautiful, modern midrash that I'd like to share with you. It's written by a Quaker woman by the name of Marion McNaughton. And she apparently studied some midrash, and here's her take. Here's McNaughton's picture of the story. And I want to share it with you because I think it's very, very revealing. And with a heavy heart, Abraham went to his wife Sarah and said, God has told me to take our son Isaac, whom we love, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering. And Sarah said, a shrewd move. This God is no fool. This is her way of testing you. And what did you say to her, Abraham? And Abraham replied, I said nothing. I want God to know that I will obey him without question. And I will do so as he commands. And Sarah threw up her hands in despair and said, Abraham, you are a boneheaded fool. What kind of a God do you think you are dealing with? What kind of a God would want you to kill your own son to prove how religious you are? Don't be so stupid. She's trying to teach you something, that you must challenge even the highest authority on questions of right and wrong. Argue with her. Wrestle with her. But Sarah's words smacked to Abraham of blasphemy. And he went into the mountains with his son Isaac. And Sarah said to God, you are playing with fire. You don't know my husband. He is too stupid to understand what you are up to. He won't listen to me, and he won't challenge you. And if you don't stop him, he will kill our precious son. Is that what you really want? And God said, Sarah, they have a long journey to get to the location in the mountains. I'm hoping one of them will see sense. And Sarah said, like father, like son, you'll have to send an angel. And it came to pass, as Sarah foretold, and the angel of the Lord spoke to Abraham the first time and told him, do not send forth your hand on this child. And Abraham sacrificed a ram as a burnt offering. And the angel of the Lord spoke to Abraham a second time and told him his offspring would be as numerous as the stars in the heaven. would possess the gates of the enemies. And the angel of the Lord spoke to Abraham a third time and said, because you were ready to kill your only son, your own son, in the name of your God, you'll be known as a great patriarch, and millions will follow your example. And they will believe that he is indeed a jealous and demanding God. And they will willingly sacrifice their sons in his name and to his glory. And there will be bloodshed and there will be slaughter in all the corners of the earth. And Abraham returned to his wife Sarah and said, God is well pleased with me, for I am to be a mighty patriarch. And Sarah said nothing, but she took the garments of Abraham and Isaac that were stained with the blood of the ram, and she carried them to the river to be washed. And the river ran red with blood of the generations to come, and Sarah wept bitterly. And God came to Sarah at the water's edge and said, Sarah, do not weep. You were right. It will take time. Meanwhile, hold firm to what you know of me and speak of it boldly. I am as you know me to be. Many generations will pass, and a new understanding will come to the children of Abraham. But before then, I shall be misheard and misrepresented, except by a few. You must keep my truth alive. And Sarah dried her eyes and said, as if I didn't have enough to do already. And I thought this was really very, very cute when I read it. I guess most wives would agree that about their husbands, like to see my wife shaking her head. Pirkei Avot brings the teaching that God tested Abraham with 10 tests. The 10 tests aren't listed there, but this episode of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, is on Maimonides' list of the 10 tests. In her Midrash, Marion McNaughton says Abraham failed the test and failed it miserably. The test wasn't about blind obedience. The test was about how firm Abraham was in his conviction to challenge authority, in his understanding of what God really wants of us. Why did Abraham argue with Sodom and Gomorrah and not about his own son Isaac? The reason that's given is that Abraham was a bystander to what was going to happen in Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't really have any skin in the game. It wasn't really, he was a bystander. He had no connection there. God didn't order him to do anything. He didn't have to do anything. So Abraham felt free to challenge God because he had nothing to lose. He wasn't trying to get out of something. But in the Akedah, God issued a direct order. God said, take your son and offer him as a burnt offering. Abraham assumed that one had to obey God, that God demanded strict, blind obedience. I was just following orders is never an excuse for immoral behavior. When Adolf Eichmann, Yamach Shemo v'Zichro, was put on trial in Israel for his war crimes during the Shaare, he claimed he was simply following orders. Everything he did was legal according to German law. The Torah can't possibly give us a rule for every circumstance we are going to encounter throughout our lives. Through studying Torah, we can learn about God. Studying Torah should help us fine-tune our internal moral compass so that we will be readily able to discern right from wrong, so that we will have the courage to speak up when we see injustice, so that we will have the courage to disobey an order that we know immoral, no matter who gives that order, where it comes from, your boss, the prime minister, or yes, even God. The regulations for the Canadian Armed Forces, a prayer to whom we just said just a few minutes ago. The Queen's Regulation and Orders, it's called the QRO, tells us that our soldiers are to rely on their internal moral compass in deciding whether an order is lawful or not. And Jaden, I hope you're listening here, because in life you're going to have to do just this. And today, as a bar mitzvah, you assume responsibility for your actions, whether you want to or not. The QRO states that if a soldier commits a crime in complying with a manifestly unlawful order, he is subject to punishment. So the question is, how does the soldier know if an order is manifestly unlawful? And so it goes on to say, the definition is, it is one that would appear to a person of ordinary sense and understanding to be clearly illegal. For example, a command by an officer or non-commissioned member to shoot a member for having used disrespectful words, or a command to shoot an unarmed child. Anybody with normal sense will know that this is illegal. It doesn't matter where the order comes from, regardless of whether it comes from your immediate superior, the commander of the armed forces, or the Prime Minister himself. You don't obey an unlawful order. And you have to rely on your sense, your understanding, to know what is legal and what isn't. Now, Jews, believe it or not, have a very long history of engaging in civil disobedience. Yes, you heard me correctly. Engaging in civil disobedience. Going back to Shifra and Puah in the story of Egypt, in the Torah, the midwives refused to obey Pharaoh's orders and kill the male babies. I think that might be the first recordation, actually, of civil disobedience. What do you think, Rabbi? I think it's pretty early on, right? Can't get much earlier than that. In the Middle Ages, the concept of dinah de malchuta dinah, the law of the land is the law, evolved. Jews were told by their rabbis, we follow the laws of the land even if it overrules some of our customs, as long as the law is just and administered evenly. But unjust laws, or discriminatory laws, or ones contrary to the Torah laws, were to be disobeyed. When schools in Germany compelled attendance on Shabbat, some parents sent their children but forbade them to write any lessons so as to comply with Torah law. More recently, Never Again Action. I don't know if you've heard of them. Never Against Action is a group of Jewish activists. They physically blocked entrances to the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention centers in protest of the treatment of immigrants. Their handbook, if you look at their handbook, it instructs protesters not to be nice, not to be nice about blocking the entrances, do whatever it takes. It advised them to chant in Yiddish. It advised them to sing in Hebrew prayers. And their book of instruction says, I'm going to quote, defiant, angry, urgent, Jewish. The goal is to actually make it impossible for ICE and for the democratic establishment to do business as usual. Find the choke point and shut it off. My friends, the rules about disobeying unlawful orders are not just for people serving in the military. we must all be true to our internal moral compass. We must all know right from wrong. And this for you, Jaden, is going to be difficult because you grow up, you're going to have to grapple with decisions that you're going to have to make, and you're going to constantly have to focus. But you come from a great family. You've got good support. And that's where you get the moral compass from. May the Holy One grant you and grant all of us the wisdom to have a sound compass and the courage to act on what we know is right. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.